Swan Districts joined the league competition in the year of 1934. The years leading up to it, possibly between 1925 and 1934, were very important years for the Black and Whites. And we're talking now with one of their former presidents, in Fritz Lange, who was a president from 1936 for about 7 years. Well, let's talk about those years prior to 1934 when Swan Districts did enter the league. They must have been pretty heady days when Midland was a member of the league back, say, in 1918.
They were. Midland was well in the play of those days with that competition. They weren't behind we had some extra good footballers those days. Well, it proved that when they came down to the Bassendean originally.
And who were some of the good players, Fritz?
Well, Keith McInerney was a good one. Georgie Krepp was another one. The Parks boys were others. I was there myself. And well, one chap we used to call Germany Higgins was a crackerjack fellow, but he never went to East Perth. But a chap named Borthwick, who was another good one that went to East Perth. Well, Keith Watts was another one.
In those days, like, it wasn't necessarily, they didn't divide the metropolitan area up into each club's district, so it was a sort of an open competition sort
More
of business,
or less,
wasn't it?
Yes.
And in other words, league clubs would come and try and get clearances for players from Midland area?
Oh yes, undoubtedly.
Well, they tell me at one stage that Midland were in debt to the league. What, couldn't you pay your dues? Would that be right? The club couldn't pay their dues?
No, we couldn't pay anything.
It was like that. Well, then I believe then that East Perth came along and sort of lifted the debt, and so that they could get a clearance for a few Midland players.
East Perth took whatever Midland's debt was to the league. They took that over on conditions that 5 of the Midland players went down and played for East Perth.
Could you remember some of the names of those who
well,
went to play
there
for
was
East Perth?
Georgie Krepp, Keith McInerney. He didn't go down to East Perth, but he was one of the section of the ones that could have gone down.
Yeah.
And I went down. Billy Hayes went down, and Gordon Watts was down, another one that went down. That'd be about 4 or 5.
4 or 5, yeah. Well, then after that, Midland sort of got into the B grade, and you were their president, weren't you, from about 1920 up until 1934? The B grade side.
Yes.
And then the formation of Swan Districts came along in 1934, and there was, like yourself and Dick McDonald, he was the first president of Swans, wasn't he?
Dick was the chairman of Bassendean.
Yeah, and you were virtually like vice president.
I was vice president for that first 1934.
And what part would Ernie Wicks? He played a part in
Ernie
the
Wicks. Yes, Ernie Wicks was a good fellow. A chap named now it just went out of my mind. Stewart was a great friend of Ernie Wicks's, and those two together were their stalwart more or less. They did a lot of the financing and went into that sort of part.
Well, apparently in those days too, there were some very good workers around the place. Like the names that come to mind: Hope Lucas and Harry Walker.
Yes, Harry Walker, Hope Lucas. They were 2 extra. Hope Lucas was secretary for quite a long while.
And what about, we move along then, say a couple of years, you became president, I think in 1936, didn't you?
No, 35.
35, was it?
Yeah, I was 1 year as vice president, and from then on I went on to president from 35.
Until about 1942, I think.
Something like that, yes.
And of course, in 1936, Bert Chandler came to the Swan Districts Football Club.
Yes, well, Bert Chandler was one we brought over from the eastern states.
They tell me that the price was £300.
That's correct.
A lot of money in those days.
You're telling me it was a lot of money. We had to find it too, that was another thing.
Well, they tell me the league dividend in that year, in 1936, was only about 560 odd pounds.
It wasn't that much, I don't think.
Oh, well,
300 and odd pounds.
Must have had a lot of people that were prepared to put in a pound for Bert Chandler then.
That is so. Well, chaps like Ernie Wicks and those fellows, they were the ones that we were relying on. A chap named Ted Burns at the Guildford Hotel, he was another good fella for finance.
Chandler a good coach?
Bert Chandler was an excellent coach.
Yes.
He was one of the best footballers ever came to Western Australia, I think. because you could put him anywhere in the field and he was a top-notcher.
How did it come about that you approached Chandler to become coach of Swan Districts?
Well, I forget now. Somebody told us something about it, and I think it was Hope Lucas and myself went over to South Australia to interview him.
I see, and they tell me a couple of other good footballers too came in that time. There's Clem Rosewarne.
Clem Rosewarne, he's another South Australian.
And a good player.
And a good one. He was another one. Yeah.
Very versatile.
Yeah.
And another fella, Charlie Avery too. He was involved around about that time, wasn't he?
Yes, Charlie Avery came over. Well, I think he was a little bit a year after those, I think, from memory.
And it was a pretty solid sort of competition around about those years too. Western Australian football had started to emerge like as a football state, hadn't it? Against Victoria and interstate games and that sort of business.
That's correct. They were showing up in Western Australia against the previous to that. Of course, we were only West Australia was in the name. That was about all as far as the football was concerned.
Fritz, I'll ask you one final question because there's a bit of humour behind this, I believe. That at one stage the club, I believe, bought a piano for £150, and because the club got into financial difficulties, the bailiffs came in and tried to take it away from the club. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, we weren't financial enough to hold the piano, but we eventually did. They didn't actually get away with it. We came to light and stopped there.
Well, I don't think times have changed even in this day and age. Only the sums of money have got a bit bigger, haven't they?
Oh my God, yes, you're telling me.
You're still showing interest in the game?
Oh yes, I go up quite often when I can go. When the games are on, and I go up quite a lot. Most of the home games I go to. I don't go to the outside ones much unless they come to Fremantle, of course.
And of course you still get a bit disappointed if Swans lose?
Oh, undoubtedly. I'm a Swans man. I've never been anybody else's man but a Swan man.
Good on you.